Today we're diving into Professor Thomas Seyfried's revolutionary and, honestly, super empowering perspective on cancer. We're looking at a profound paradigm shift here. We're moving away from viewing this disease as just some inevitable genetic curse that we have absolutely no control over, and instead seeing it as a metabolic disease, one that we can actively manage, understand, and even prevent. So let's jump right into this.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the true origin of cancer. Then we'll meet your mitochondria. After that, we'll uncover the ancient survival switch, talk about starving the disease, and finally, wrap up with measuring metabolic health.
All right, Section 1, the true origin of cancer.
To put this into perspective, we're looking at roughly 1,700 Americans dying every single day from cancer. That adds up to a projected 626,000 deaths in the year 2026 alone. It's painstakingly clear, right? Our current approaches to fighting this disease just are not turning the tide. Despite decades of funding and research, incidence rates just keep climbing.
So what's actually going on? Well, this illustrates a massive debate happening in medical science right now. Mainstream oncology is heavily focused on the somatic mutation theory, basically the belief that random DNA mutations drive cancer. But Professor Seyfried's hard science points us in a completely different direction, the metabolic theory. He proves that the nucleus actually isn't the root of the problem. Cancer is fundamentally an energy problem in the cell, and those genetic mutations, they're simply downstream symptoms.
Moving on to Section 2, meet your mitochondria.
Now, you probably remember from high school biology that mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, but they aren't just simple energy factories. They actually act as the brain of the cell. This little tubular network combusts oxygen to give us super efficient energy, sure, but it also dictates exactly when a cell should divide, communicating with your entire body to keep perfect metabolic homeostasis.
But here's the catch. Our modern environment acts as terrible fuel for this delicate engine. We're talking chronic exposure to highly processed carbohydrates, nonstop emotional stress, awful sleep habits, inactivity, and even exposure to forever chemicals like microplastics and PFAS. All of these stressors literally tear down and damage the delicate internal structure of our mitochondria over time. We are essentially suffocating our own cellular engines.
Which brings us to Section 3, the ancient survival switch.
So what happens when these engines break? It creates this crazy biological domino effect. First, the mitochondria sustain chronic damage. Because of that, their highly efficient oxygen-based energy production just completely fails. But here's the wild part. A damaged cell refuses to just instantly die. Instead, it flips a prehistoric survival switch. It abandons its broken oxygen engine and falls back on a primitive, totally unregulated fermentation process. And once that mitochondrial regulation is gone, that's when unregulated, selfish cell growth, which is cancer, begins.
And because this ancient fermentation is an incredibly inefficient way to make energy, the broken cell gets wildly greedy. To survive through fermentation, cancer cells require massive, constant amounts of glucose, which is sugar, and glutamine, a common amino acid. They literally have to pull in huge amounts of these fuels just to survive and continue their selfish growth at the expense of your body.
Let's get into Section 4, starving the disease.
Now, the contrast between a healthy cell and a cancer cell is your ultimate biological weapon. Your healthy cells can easily and seamlessly transition to burning fat and ketones for highly efficient energy. But cancer cells, since they possess broken mitochondria, they physically cannot burn ketones for fuel. They absolutely require that massive influx of glucose and glutamine, or they die. This makes them uniquely vulnerable if we simply change what we eat and lower our blood sugar.
By shifting into a state of nutritional ketosis, which, by the way, is exactly how our Paleolithic ancestors naturally lived, we essentially pull the plug on the tumor's glucose supply. When we stop flooding the body with sugar, the cancer cell stops dumping lactic acid waste. That actually strips away the tumor's metabolic shield, making an angry tumor incredibly vulnerable, and clinical treatments remarkably more effective.
Finally, Section 5, measuring metabolic health. Professor Seyfried and his team developed something called the Glucose Ketone Index, or GKI. It's a remarkably simple ratio for calculating your metabolic health. You just take your blood glucose measurement and divide it by your blood ketone measurement. That's it. It's a brilliant quantitative tool that literally anyone can use right at home with a basic finger prick monitor to gauge exactly how metabolically healthy their cellular engines are on any given day. Think of this as your very own bioenergetic roadmap to health.
You obviously want to avoid living constantly in that high-sugar red zone, where a modern diet drives up glucose and creates the perfect environment for chronic disease to thrive. Instead, you want to use your lifestyle habits to hang out down in the green and yellow prevention zones. This mimics our natural Paleolithic state, safely burning ketones and actively starving damaged cells in an environment where cancer really struggles to survive.
And here's the best part. You don't need to wait for a massive medical breakthrough to fix this. You can take absolute control today. You can vastly improve your GKI by just cutting out ultra-processed carbohydrates, trying out intermittent fasting to gracefully shift your body over to lipid fuels, prioritizing high-quality sleep, exercising regularly, and managing emotional stress. You literally have the power to let your body run on the clean fuel it evolved to use.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on. Take a really close look at your daily habits, your stress, your sleep, and your diet, and ask yourself, based on your current lifestyle, are you feeding healthy mitochondria, or are you feeding an ancient survival switch? Which cellular energy engine are you choosing to fuel today?